Hey, welcome to the Touchlab YouTube channel. My name is Eric and I'm on the marketing team at Touchlab. You're about to watch a recording of our team coming together to chat and discuss the Kotlin 1.4 online event. This event is running for 4 days. Every day, we're coming together as a team to recap what happened on that day, share our thoughts, and ultimately talk about what this all means if you're a manager or a developer interested in adopting Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile or KMM at your organization. If there's a resource that we mentioned during the recordings, don't worry, the link to that resource will be found in the description. As always, we really appreciate you watching, and if you like what you see and are interested in Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile, please subscribe because we'll be sharing a lot more of these videos moving forward. Thanks again. Hello, this is day 3 of the Kotlin 1.4 event recaps that we're producing here at Touchlab. This day was really focused on Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile. There was a lot of conversation around KMM entering alpha. So we're really going to focus on 2 major talks. One is probably going to take up the most of our time, but the first was a talk by Kate, who's a developer advocate over at JetBrains, in which the name of her talk was "It's Time for Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile." Let's do a little bit of a roundtable on just general impressions of the talk. What stood out to everyone? Justin, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, well, it really starts with the title. We were hearing when the alpha announcement came out that a lot of people in the community, people who hadn't really thought of KMM before, were starting to say, okay, now I'm ready to look at it. And so her title is just taking that enthusiasm that we're seeing all over the place and distilling it into it is time for Kotlin multi-platform, and especially on mobile. With adding in the tooling, the investment that JetBrains is putting into it, it shows that it's here to stay. And this is not a side project for them. This is something that they're really committed to, and they want to see the community continue to grow. More applications get developed in this. And at Touchlab, we're really happy to be part of that.
I thought it was really interesting how she drew out where Kotlin Multiplatform or Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile's place was in the context of other tools. We definitely get questions about like how this tool relates to UI sharing tools and what its place is. So it was interesting to see. It laid out really well about like the strengths of Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile for sharing your logic code and where its place is going to be.
I thought one of the really neat things she did was she's following kind of these 2 different examples most of the way through. So there's like starting from a new project versus integrating into an existing project. And I think keeping both of those in mind really highlights the strength and flexibility of KMM. So it was neat to see that highlighted.
You know, it is interesting because we're kind of deep in the weeds technically. And often, again, by nature of who's hiring someone like us, we're kind of working with larger teams. So it was interesting. Like we're usually working in a particular context, but it was good to see the hiring, as others have said, of where this would fit. And often a lot of the talks are more around way more mechanics of what. And this is a little more like, where would this fit into your world? So, which is harder to talk to, right, frankly, to be honest. So it's good.
What I'd like to do is just bring up a couple of key segments from her talk that I think are important, because these are some of the things that we're finding are top of mind for our clients. So we can imagine that they're going to be top of mind for other folks as well. And this first clip is going to be around, she breaks down KMM, KMP, and I want Justin to kind of comment after this, because I know this has been top of mind for you. But let's watch here how she kind of describes how this whole ecosystem fits together right now.
So KMM equals Kotlin Multiplatform plus the mobile-specific stuff around it. What is the mobile-specific stuff? The best example is the new KMM plugin for Android Studio, which allows you to write, test, run, and debug shared code in the same IDE.
You've seen some folks from the community have some confusion around how does KMP match up with Kotlin native. Could you just give us, your overview of how that all fits together?
Yeah, I'm really glad she brought this up, because even before the alpha announcement, there was like, how does Kotlin JS fit in with Kotlin native? How does Kotlin native fit in with Kotlin on Android? And then after the alpha announcement, we saw this happen again. People are saying, wait, now there's KMM. How does that fit in with KMP? How about Kotlin MPP that we've been using even before that? So her bringing that up and distilling it, Kotlin Multiplatform is the umbrella. That is what allows you to use Kotlin on different platforms, including JavaScript, including on server, including on Android, including in native platforms like iOS. And so when she started bringing that together, especially with the tooling that comes with it. So KMM was a much bigger announcement than just we have a website now. We have this Android Studio plugin, and we have this CocoaPods Gradle plugin, which we're continuing to invest in for the developer tooling around using Kotlin Multiplatform on mobile. So that really shows where KMM fits into the Kotlin Multiplatform umbrella.
Perfect. One of the other things that was super interesting, and this won't be new to us, right? Because we've kind of been giving this pitch for I'd say a couple of years now. But some of the things that really resonated for me, at least, was the risk profile of Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile. So I want to dial up another segment real quick, and then have the team kind of just give your impressions of, does this make sense? What are our thoughts on it?
Let's first take a look at the architecture of a standard mobile app. Basically, it consists of several layers: the UI layer, presentation layer, business layer, and data access layer. If we imagine a scale where the bottom point is core and the top point is UI, we can see that the most popular cross-platform approaches are UI-centric. What does it mean? Well, it doesn't mean that you can't write business logic code. Of course you can. It means that the whole ecosystem is focused mainly on developing UI components. But when you decide to write something more complicated than just sending HTTP requests, you will be almost alone in this wild, vast cross-platform world because of the lack of libraries and practices. However, these technologies allow you to create similar interfaces for your apps very quickly. So this approach is absolutely justified when you have simple apps, thin clients, or if you just want to make an MVP to test your product assumptions. But when your product starts to grow, the UI quality and responsiveness requirements get stricter, and the business logic becomes too complicated for your UI-centric approach. This is where the business logic-based approaches came in. We already have well-known players here, such as strategies to have shared C++ or JavaScript code. As always, they come with different advantages and disadvantages. One of the most harmful disadvantages is the need to add one more additional language to the existing code base, together with its own tooling, ecosystem, and rules. Well, this doesn't seem like the easiest way to avoid duplicating some parts of your code.
She said it best there, that adding another third platform potentially, right, to some of these scenarios isn't ideal. So Kevin, just kind of give us your thoughts on you watching that, you having seen that said by someone else besides yourself.
Well, we're here talking about the tech. Clearly, we like, no, I mean, I have that slide I do in my talks, which is like the concise definition of why Kotlin is different than everything else. And, yeah, you can use C++, but now you have another language. It's also, frankly, easier to create foot guns with C++, as they put it, because it's pretty low-level language. But it's also around, like, Kotlin's popular. It's a modern language. And what really differentiates all this is Kotlin's Interop, right? So with C++, long story, JS, you got this really, different barrier you have to translate between. And with all the other UI frameworks, they treat the world outside of itself as this weird world that you have to talk to in a very strict way. Kotlin's Interop allows for a much easier integration story. So I answered a question at a conference recently. Yeah, and you know, the short of it was about, you know, Flutter. Why not Flutter versus this thing? And it was like, you know, Flutter is ready, KMP is still a work in progress. And well, what's not ready and may never be is Flutter's Interop story. If you want to add a Flutter screen into an existing app, like, how long is that going to take? I mean, it, you know, it's like, that's the thing that's missing. And the risk of something that you can add in partially and do units with without creating this enormous, you know, extra thing is where it's different. So I could talk about this a lot. It's the core reason why we're into the tech.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that people who may have known about Touchlab in our past, we were always an Android company, and they might think or make the assumption that we're into Kotlin native because we were an Android company and Kotlin is official on Android since 2017. But I would love Kevin to talk about, dispel some of those myths, because we have looked at React Native, we have looked at J2OBJC and other things as well. And it's about the context of where we see the pros and cons of those things.
Have looked at J2OBJC, yes,
Yeah.
with a couple of years of my life. Yeah, we've looked at other tech, and I do, yeah, that's true. Like, I think people are going to assume, like, well, of course you like Kotlin. And I've gotten that. I've spoken in front of iOS communities and gotten some very pointed questions. And, you know, to all the JetBrains friends, earmuffs, please, as I say something controversial. If Swift for Android could output bytecode for Java and have, like, great interop and any hope of existing, like, you know, sounds great. But it's just not a viable thing. It's not. Yes, you can compile Swift for Android. That's like the very beginning of the story. You can't use Almafire. There's nobody out there doing this stuff. There's no JetBrains equivalent in the iOS world. You know, React Native works, you know, but there's a risk of, like, how long is Facebook going to be invested in this? Why are they building it? Like, and then there's performance considerations, you know, and who's going to update the libraries. Like, there's all kinds of stuff that's behind that, and it's a riskier proposition. I can go into Flutter, but I think we'll skip it because, you know, don't want to upset anybody.
Kind of want to use this opportunity, since we have so many folks on, you know, the team that are working on actual client projects, and without giving, you know, any confidential information out, what kind of use cases are we seeing for KMM at Touchlab with our clients? Kate had a point of view that there's definitely some types of apps that work best for KMM in her presentation, but I'd really love to hear from you folks. What are we seeing? How are we using it? Is there any generalizations that we can kind of share with folks listening to this?
I just want to say one thing I forgot to mention with the risk thing. You know, and this goes back to, actually, Justin brought up the J2OBJC thing. Like, I got heavily into that, obsessed, and we as a company built something essentially because the tech, one side of it is not more cross-platform at all. J2OBJC was that way, so is Kotlin. I think it's platform native to Android, and we're working with one client now that we won't talk about at all, except to say that we're building both sides of their app. And we were able to move super fast, proving product out on the Android side. And then we're about to switch gears very soon and publish the iOS screens quite quickly. But we have other contexts that are wildly different, and I'll let other folks talk about that. But anyway.
Yeah, to answer that, like, Eric's question, like, the project that I've been working on lately, along with Sam, has a lot of just, like, fairly complex client-side logic that is nice to have written once and not twice, so that you fix your bugs once and you don't have to, like, have that extra overhead. And I think Kat's breakdown of it was very good, where she's talking about, like, UI down to kind of like your core business logic. And like every app kind of has a slightly different terminology and ways it defines those things, but there's almost always in a complex enough app some stuff that is like, here's the stuff that is specific to the app, but doesn't care about the platform. And that's where this stuff really shines.
I think the other important thought when looking at like where does the shared line land is where the project's at when you start the KMP process. I think that was touched on in the talk as well. But starting greenfield KMP is going to look wildly different than a fully established app with their own build system that we're introducing KMP into. Starting greenfield KMP makes a lot of the build setup a lot easier, and you'll end up with that very kind of clean line around the view layer where everything else is shared, including the logic and the core layers that Kate showed. But one of the flexibility, one of the strengths of KMP is the flexibility to alternatively say, we're going to start small and find a small module of functionality to start sharing. And that looks a lot different. Introducing KMP into an existing build system is more tricky than starting fresh. But it provides a really accessible avenue for starting KMP on an existing project.
Yeah, I would round that out with the other end of the spectrum of folks we're working with currently is doing that, trying to figure out how do you put this into a existing build system with existing teams and not necessarily small teams. And we're transitioning into like a first do no harm, as in like don't slow anything down process, because we kind of have to. We can't put this thing into this ecosystem and then tell the developers like, hey, your build's going to take a few minutes. It doesn't work. So and it's a lot of this stuff is sorting out, but it's working out.
I think it just shows that KMM can be used in a variety of projects, whereas we've definitely seen, and we've had clients as well that started with a different technology and they said this just is not working for us anymore. Of course, any technology, if you put enough effort into it, you can make it work. But are you willing to invest that yourself, or are there other companies in the community that are going to be doing that with you or for you? I'm reminded of when Shopify went all in on React Native. They decided that they are going to heavily invest in this, and they have to. But with Kotlin Multiplatform, you have JetBrains, who's since IntelliJ days in 2001 or something, they've been so highly respected for the tooling and the amount of work and effort and how great the quality of the things that they make. So you have some company like that who's heavily invested in this. And then in another talk today, they're saying Google is also investing in it by making it the official language for Android. And now the Android team is putting things into it. The library teams for Android are also contributing to the core code. So now you have from two different sides. And you also have Touchlab, who are pushing the boundaries for the clients, rather than Google pushing the boundaries for themselves, and JetBrains making sure that developer ecosystem continues to get adoption and growing.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things that came up in addition to that question in terms of like, what are the use cases for this framework was around the iOS involvement. So I want to play another clip from Kate's talk where she really makes the case for why there is some tight integration between KMM and then the iOS development process. So let's watch real quick.
Of course, KMM is seamlessly integrated with Android. Use Kotlin for every part of your project and work in the same IDE, both for shared code and for platform code. But we are writing shared code for both platforms, and KMM also provides tight integration with the iOS development process. thanks to the Kotlin native bidirectional interoperability with Objective-C Swift, you can call Kotlin code from Objective-C Swift and use iOS libraries from Kotlin. You can integrate KMM models in a natural way for iOS developers using the CocoaPods dependency manager. And you don't even need to switch IDEs while working on the shared code. With a new KMM Android Studio plugin, you can write, run, test, and debug shared code all in Android Studio. Let's take a closer look at these features.
So there you have the JetBrains kind of point of view on how they're making the iOS developer experience for KMM feel native, right? We've done a lot on this particular subject. So I kind of want to first get our historical projects on that were focused on making the iOS developer experience better. Like what have we done in this space before?
So we did do, they contribute to and it was mentioned in the first day's talk, generics to the interface for the Objective-C header output, which, is useful. And doing that also, I think gave us a much deeper knowledge of how everything actually works together, which is sort of interesting at that level. And we have an Xcode plugin that lets you see Kotlin code colored, but also debug in Xcode. That is essentially, it's a long story, but there's the way that debugging in native code works with LDB uses formatting scripts to show, go into memory and pull some stuff out and show it to the user. And we did a fair bit of work optimizing the default scripts. That fair bit of work is continuing because there's a sort of a battle between wanting to use this at the command line versus use it with a visual debugger, and I would deep dive on that talk, but you're all going to get bored. So I'll just say there was a release put out for the Xcode plugin a couple of days ago, so it should perform a little better. But the good thing is that all of the tools, the Android Studio plugin, Xcode plugin, IntelliJ, anything that's going to debug Kotlin is going to kind of use this core set of things. So over time, all the contributions should hopefully make it pretty cool.
It's equal part tooling and process or behaviors. We finding the right ways to bring iOS developers into KMM development has included starting out at the strategy where, we're publishing a library that you consume and you don't have to think about KMM. And we've talked about how has its advantages, but ultimately you aren't going to be bringing your iOS developers onto the multi-platform team that way. And so we've made efforts to encourage multi-platform development through project management and how we handle meetings and who we bring into meetings to make sure that it's not the Android team who's doing the multi-platform and the iOS team who's consuming it. It is a multi-platform team, and we make sure that everybody is able to contribute.
I think it's worth noting that Kevin was invited to join this primarily JetBrains only kind of event. He was asked to take part in the KMM Q&A part of the day, which was day 3, which is what we're covering here. So let's tune into that.
We will actually have 2 more guests joining us today, which were not speaking today, but can answer your questions. Svetoslav Sherbina, team lead in Kotlin Native, and Kevin Galligan from Touchlab, which is our partner.
How steep would you say is the learning curve for Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile?
That's an interesting question, and there's a lot of things that might go into that answer. I think we did a lot of work on this thing called CampKit, which is just like a getting started, app example with basic stuff like database and coroutines and views and stuff like that. Because like we wanted that like 10-minute getting started experience to be pretty good. From there, if you're just doing data network calls, as long as you follow best practices of like not modifying your data classes in stream, things like that, it's not too bad. Obviously, if you get into the weeds with concurrency, that's kind of what I talked about for the last couple of years, over and over. It's new, so don't expect it to just work the same. And of course, it's changing. So I would say is not too steep if it's pretty straightforward, and it gets steeper the deeper you go, or the higher you go, or whatever.
I think this might actually be our last one here.
Okay.
It goes out to Kevin once more, and the question is, what about the performance comparison between Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile and native applications? Is this something that people should be concerned about or think about?
Last question. Thanks for the easy
one.
one.
We'll do another one afterwards, just so that the pressure is gone, apparently.
So, should you be concerned about performance? Like, of course, as a general rule, but performance is kind of a tricky thing to measure, right? So you'll see people are like, hey, I ran this in the JVM and I ran in Kotlin native, and they're nowhere near each other or whatever. But benchmarks are funny things. For example, I wrote SQLite driver. It's underneath SQLite, and with some optimizations we should be putting in there soon, that'll run faster on native than Android because there's no JNI, presumably. I don't know exactly why, but not blindingly faster, slightly, right? You have to you're building usually in a native mobile situation anyway, you're like calling a network, getting data from disk, orders of magnitude slower than anything you have to worry about computationally, right? So I don't know, should you worry about it? Sure. Should you stress over benchmarks of one thing compared to another, which are kind of arbitrary? I don't. They're ballparkish, especially when you compare to like Swift, which is a more natural comparison currently than the JVM, right? I think the team is nodding heads to this. Yes, it's a more fair comparison. I would say the other thing that was asked in questions was about size, and then I have a long-standing blog post about binary size, which is a whole different thing. But the short version is, with some best practices, they're equivalent-ish compared to if you're doing Swift code, that kind of thing. So,
how do you convince the iOS developers in the company to learn or write Kotlin in order to maintain MPP code?
I feel like I've heard this one before.
Yeah.
How do you convince iOS developers? Is that the question?
That is the question.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I would say, and this is the thing that we said a bunch and check out. I think Kate wrote the thing that's on the game website. Start with empathy. If you're an Android developer and the web team shows up and says, hey, you don't need to do that anymore, we got this other thing. Don't come in that strong, perhaps. Look for allies, especially, in any production environment. Any build system is going to be really hard to just slam something into, especially if you're not accustomed to that kind of build system. So certainly that is true. And this is a lot of what I've been dealing with day to day is how do you put Kotlin into a production iOS system without disrupting what's going on there on a day-to-day basis. So it's not trivial, and you're going to need folks from the iOS team to help out. And so let's look for curious folks in any dev ecosystem. Some people are going to say, no way, I'm not looking at any of this. But that's not everybody. So there's other stuff too, like because it's incrementally, you can add small things. You don't have to make a big decision. Pick things that nobody wants to do. So I don't know a ton of iOS developers who love core data. So doing database modules is maybe a place to start. A lot of bigger teams are starting to do like typed analytics libraries because most developers that I've worked with, and myself included, don't really enjoy adding analytics strings all over their app, like that kind of stuff. And then, yes, trying to pull some of the iOS engineers to start contributing code. Some team we work with, they, first time you submit a pull request that's shared code, you get like a mug or something and you're part of, stuff like that. I don't know. Read the article. It's
Thanks for watching. This was our day 3 recap of the Kotlin 1.4 event. If there was any resources mentioned during this conversation with the team, they'll be linked to in the description for this video. But Russell, Kevin, Sam, thank you so much for your time. And with that said, we'll sign off. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.